This is what the factory front control arms look like on a Jeep Wrangler or JT Gladiator. And as you can see, they sit pretty much parallel to the ground. And if you put something like an angle finder on one, you can see that there's only about 3, maybe 4 degrees of angle on it. Now, this is done on purpose to provide ride comfort and better handling, and it's the reason why you'd want to install something like a long arm kit on a Jeep that has a lot of lift. While not perfect, the purpose of long arms is to correct suspension geometry, as in make it sit a lot flatter or as close to stock as possible, and again, for the purpose of ride comfort and handling on things like pavement or when bombing across the desert, and not to give you more flex out on the rocks. However, there is another way to correct the geometry of your control arms after installing a tall lift, and that's with a set of these. These are a set of geometry correction brackets, or drop brackets, and as their name would imply, they're designed to restore the angle of your front control arms back to a factory setting and without having to do any drilling, cutting, or welding as would be the case with a set of long arms. I should note that these brackets are made by EVO Manufacturing. However, this video should help you to install just about any drop bracket that's available on the market today. To get things started, the first thing you're going to want to make sure is that your Jeep is parked on a level surface and that your parking brake is engaged. And while it totally isn't necessary to do, I'm going to raise the front end of my Jeep up and place the front axle on a pair of jack stands. And then I'm going to remove the front wheels and tires. By doing this, I still have the full weight of the Jeep on the ground and a lot more room to work with. And maybe most importantly, it'll help me to show you what I'm doing. Okay, starting on the driver's side, I'm going to be using an 18mm wrench and socket to remove the front upper control arm from the axle. As far as the lower control arm goes, if we were running a factory or an aftermarket one that had a cleveite or bonded rubber bushing, the bolt securing it to the axle would need to be loosened but not removed. And this is so that we can prevent any bind from occurring after the install. Now, to loosen those bolts, you would need a 21mm socket and 24mm wrench. However, as you can see here, we've got EVO control arms, and they come with Johnny joints. So this is a step that I won't need to be doing. Okay, before I start working on the frame side, I do want to point out that I placed my tires underneath the frame rails just for added safety. Okay, now using a 10mm socket, I'm going to remove the 2 bolts securing the heat shield to the frame. Of course, the upper bolt is a little bit harder to get to, so I'm going to be using a gear wrench to get that one off. All right, now using an 18mm socket, I'm going to go ahead and remove the bolt securing the upper control arm to the frame. All right, just like the axle end, a 21mm socket and a 24mm wrench will be needed to remove the bolt securing the lower control arm to the frame. All right, starting with the driver's side bracket, which I believe this is, we're going to grab a long crush tube, a short one, basically one of everything that's here in the hardware provided. There's a couple of these. think that's it. All right, first things first, if you have a Rubicon like we do, this wiring harness is going to need to be separated from the upper control arm, and a trim pry tool like this will help you to do that. Now the upper control arm can be removed. All right, now it's time to get this bracket installed. And to do that, it's going to need to be inserted up into the pockets of the factory control arm brackets. And we're going to need to grab this large crush sleeve for the lower end, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky because a third hand would really be helpful here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this up, place my finger through this hole, and then hold the crush sleeve in place while I feed in the factory bolt. So let's give this a try. So go up, take the crush sleeve. Okay, there, it's held in place. Take the factory bolt, slide it through, perfect. Now we're going to take this reinforcement washer, place it on the back side, and then the factory nut, hold it all in place. Okay, just leave that on loose for now. Now we're going to take the shorter crush sleeve, and again the factory bolt. Now we're going to rotate this up, take this shorter crush sleeve, try to work it in there, hold it in place, get the factory bolt. Okay, it's not 100% lined up, so I'm going to take a reaming tool from this side, just work that over a bit. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to take the factory flag nut and fish it up through the frame. Place it on the bolt. All right, we're going to zip this on a little bit too. All right, so for the upper arm, I'm going to set this to 80 foot-pounds. All right, so for the lower control arm, I'm going to be using this bigger torque wrench and set it to a whopping 190 foot-pounds. Okay, there we go. Now to put everything back together. All right, starting with the upper control arm, I'm going to slip this in right here into the new bracket, and then take the hardware provided by EVO, place washer on it, slip it through the hole, take another washer and the stover provided, slip that on. I'm just going to loosely put this in place for now. Over on the axle end, you could see that the bolt holes aren't really lining up, but that is something that I expected to see, especially being that we have 4.5 inches of lift and lower adjustable control arms that had been extended, and the fact that we just installed drop brackets. So normally the solution would be to use something like a floor jack placed underneath the pinion, and you'd raise it up so that the whole axle rotates until the holes line up. But because we have both control arms off and we have coil springs installed, doing that would cause the whole axle to rotate out as well, and then you'd have a bigger problem. And this is the reason why you would want to do an install like this with your wheels and tires installed and the full weight of the vehicle on the ground. But as I mentioned before, I took them off to make it easier to show you what I'm doing. But at this point in time, I'm going to put them back on because I know that's the best way to solve this problem. as you can see here, now that we have our wheels and tires on and the full weight of the Jeep on the ground, the holes actually misaligned big time in the other direction. But this is what we can now do. You can rotate the whole tire back and forth until the holes do line up, just by using our hands. So let's move this into place. There we go. Now we just need to get the nut on and work on the lower control arm. All right, let's take a look and see how off we are here. So quite a bit. And there's only so much we can do with the tire, being that the upper control arm is already installed. So now I can take my floor jack, place it under the pinion like I wanted to, raise it up, and you can see right here as I go up, the holes are getting closer to alignment. Okay, take a reaming tool just to make some fine-tune adjustments. Get this hardware loosely installed. Okay, all I need to do now is secure the bolts in place and tighten them up to torque spec. As before, I'll be using an 18mm wrench and an 18mm socket to secure this bolt in place. On the frame side, I'll be using a 3/4 inch wrench and a 3/4 inch socket to secure this in place. And finally, I'll be using a 15/16 inch socket, and in this case, a crescent wrench because I don't have a 15/16 inch wrench, to secure the lower control arm to the new drop bracket. Okay, let's grab a torque wrench. So for the bolt on the upper control arm at the axle, I'm going to tighten that up to 80 foot-pounds of torque. Okay. And before I forget, I'm going to plug this guy back in too. All right. And the same goes for the bolts on the drop bracket. And last but not least, the lower control arm bolts are going to be tightened up to 130 foot-pounds. Okay. Now, I just have to do the other side. That's all there is to it. So let's take a look and see what these brackets did for us. First, here's a shot of what our control arms look like back when we were running 4.5 inches of lift and no correction. And as you can see, without the geometry correction brackets, we were seeing about 18 degrees. And here's what our control arms look like bone stock. You can see that there's only about 3, maybe 4 degrees of angle on it. And now, with our geometry correction brackets installed, we're looking at about, maybe 10, 11 degrees, which is not exactly stock, but it's at least about halfway there, a significant improvement. Obviously, the lower control arm mounts on the frame rails were always a rock target, and it may seem counterintuitive to lower them again, especially after paying good money to get them up and out of harm's way. But for most guys out there who uses their Jeeps as a daily driver and maybe gets out on the weekend to do some overlanding, this is a great solution that's a lot cheaper and easier to install than a set of long arms. So, let's take it out for a test drive. I have to say, I was never unhappy with the quality of our ride before installing these geometry correction brackets, but I'd be lying if I said I don't feel a noticeable difference now, and for the better. Certainly, the ride is smoother, it handles better, and I know it's because I didn't change the length of our lower control arms back to a factory setting, and because of it, we are running a bit more caster, but the bit of flightiness that we were feeling at highway speeds is totally gone now as well. Of course, none of this comes as a surprise to me, and if anything, all of it is something that I was expecting to see, just like I would a set of long arms. I hope you found this video to be helpful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to post them up in the comment section below. In the meantime, if you're not already a member, we would love for you to join us on our online community at wayalife.com. Until next time, keep the shiny side up, all 4 on the floor, and with any luck, we'll see you on the trail.